The Denver Broncos have made their first round of roster cuts, trimming the roster from 90 to 85. Which players were released, and how does it impact specific positions where they now lose a player? Plus, there was an injury to keep an eye on at the Broncos' offensive line. How might it impact the lineup the next couple of days ahead of the regular season? Not to mention the Broncos playing around with one of their new linebackers in the starting lineup alongside Josey Jewell. You get that and much more in today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome into a brand new episode of Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to everybody in Broncos country for tuning in, making Locked on Broncos your first listen of the day, whether you're listening on your favorite audio podcasting platform or whether you're watching us in high definition here on YouTube. Go ahead and hit that subscribe or that follow button so you never miss out on a day's worth of Denver Broncos news, content, and coverage from the South Stands to the end zone. I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, joined alongside by my co-host, Sayre Bedinger. Sayre, my friend, usually the tough decision that a lot of NFL teams have to make. Roster cuts, always painful, especially painful for Nathaniel Hackett. He does not like having to trim the roster down, but the Broncos, they did that. They were at 90. Now they're at 85. And then next week, they're going to go from 85 to 80.
It's crazy. It's crazy to think this is already happening after just a few weeks ago. We were still in the thick of the offseason, the dog days, but here we are. We're already to the first round of cuts, and the Broncos did make 5 moves and a couple of actual surprises here, Cody. I feel like definitely Jamar Johnson, the 2021 fifth round pick out of Indiana, being cut, probably surprised the most people out of any of these 5 moves. But let's go down the line here. We've got Kaden Davis, the first out at practice every day at training camp. He was cut as well. Travis Fulgham, who we did not really see any of him hardly in that first preseason game, he was let go as well. And then Max Borghi, the Colorado high school star who played at Washington State, he didn't take advantage enough of his opportunities. He was let go. And then Rodney Williams as well. So the tight end, the undrafted tight end, a really freakish athlete, really strong testing numbers, just couldn't quite make an impression. We kind of talked about that. The whole tight end position in that first preseason game really didn't make much of an impression. So these are the first 5 moves. Obviously, very good news that the Broncos didn't have to place anybody on injured reserve, season-ending injured reserve in this round of cuts, but unfortunate for these guys, fighting for their NFL dream. Hopefully they can latch on elsewhere now.
You know what the bummer is, too? Because the day that Kaden Davis, like these guys got cut, Kaden Davis was the first guy out of practice, and Rodney Williams caught a touchdown during the team period. So, it's like, hey, you have a really good day there, and all of a sudden, you get the phone call. No one wants to do it. Like, hey, George Payton, Coach Hackett, they want to see you. On this day, that's not necessarily a good thing. We talked to Nathaniel Hackett during his press conference, and he said, it sucks. He says, this is my least favorite part, and obviously for him, it's his first time going through this as a head coach where he's going to have to be involved in making some of the personnel decisions. But when you look at Kaden Davis, you look at Travis Fulgham, it makes sense from the standpoint that we're seeing Brandon Johnson, we're seeing Jalen Virgil, Seth Williams, Kendall Hinton. These 4 guys are in a position to make more plays than these 2 guys are. So kind of releasing these guys right now gives those 2 guys an opportunity to maybe get picked up off of waivers by somebody like, looking at the Dallas Cowboys, maybe they'll pick up Travis Fulgham off their waivers. But I do think that if Kaden Davis doesn't land on an NFL team through the next couple of weeks there, I would say keep an eye on him as a practice squad guy for the Broncos. I know that they'll probably be in touch with him. Tremendous work ethic, did everything the right way, just simply didn't have a chance to make enough plays when other guys were making more plays ahead of him. And that's really how it goes. Rodney Williams mentioned the tight end position, really for where the Broncos are at, not in a position to really make the roster at this point. That was an easy move for them to make, unfortunately, as business-like and transactional as that sounds. And then you go to Max Borghi, obviously the local Colorado product there. The Broncos run game couldn't get anything going against the Dallas Cowboys. 22 rushing attempts, 39 yards. And Borghi just simply doesn't have the vision or the cut or the size, frankly, that guys like Jaquan Hardy and even Stevie Scott have. And these guys are expected to kind of get a little bit more run through the rest of the preseason so the Broncos can get to the regular season. And those guys aren't expected to make the active roster either. So just one of those decisions that you have to crunch numbers, unfortunately. But it puts the Broncos, they still have good depth at the running back position right now. Melvin Gordon's back at practice. And then going to your surprise point, Jamar Johnson, last year drafted in the 5th round, and everyone's wondering, like, what does this mean when Delarian Turner-Yell was drafted in the 5th round this year? What did it mean when J.R. Reed was brought in free agency? Did that mean something for P.J. Locke or Caden Stearns? No, it meant the opposite. P.J. Locke, Caden Stearns are the evidence 3 and 4 lock on this roster at the safety position. And unfortunately, Jamar Johnson, even though he had the game high in tackles for the Broncos against the Cowboys, he simply just couldn't make the plays that they need him to. And he had an opportunity at an interception, and he waited for the ball to come to him. And unfortunately, when you have guys like J.R. Reed who's making more plays, that's the move that's going to happen. So it's unfortunate to see, and obviously wishing Jamar Johnson, wishing all these guys that got waived today the absolute best of luck in their future endeavors. It's the tough part of the NFL business, but that is exactly what it is. And the Broncos, exactly a week from now, will be forced to do the same thing, trimming it from 85 to 80. And then 2 weeks from now, from 80 to 53. A very, very tough route for a lot of players here in the preseason. So now, against the Buffalo Bills, against the Minnesota Vikings, you have to stack some performances to give yourself a good shot at making the active roster. But Sayre, my friend, the Broncos offense is dealing with a player who has an injury in the starting lineup. How might it impact the rotation a little bit? We get to that coming up here in just a moment. But before we do that, let me tell you all about Elias Game Plan. It's almost the start of the NFL season, and I love this time of the year. And if you're into sports betting or fantasy, you need a competitive edge to win. That's why I highly recommend the Elias Game Plan app, available in all the app stores on your phone, the Google Play or the Apple App Store. It's the ultimate sports betting and fantasy companion for the NFL, the NBA, and MLB. And their app lets you access teams and player stats, head-to-head team comparisons, and Elias insights from Elias Sports Bureau's research team. This app really is your one-stop source for player news and league-validated player stats and team records. So take my advice, download the Elias Game Plan app today with new features available all the time. Take your game to the next level. The NFL season is right around the corner, so don't wait. Find Elias Game Plan in the App Store or Play Store today. The Broncos offensive line has been dealing with a couple of injuries all throughout training camp. One guy coming off the PUP list with Billy Turner, but one of the starters on the offensive line was not at practice on Tuesday with an injury. Thank you once again, Broncos country, for tuning in, making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day on your favorite podcast and provider, or whether you're watching on YouTube. Sayre, my friend, Tuesday's practice, a little bit of a surprise. I get there early, right? I get there probably about 25 minutes till practice starts. Mike Kliss and I are the first two reporters at practice. We see the clouds coming in. We're like, okay, hey, it may rain here. Soon after that, it starts dumping rain. So we had to walk all the way around to the outside, get soaked, to go watch practice indoors at the Pat Bowlen Fieldhouse. But we were looking, and obviously we take attendance every day. Who's at practice, who's not. We did not see Lloyd Cushenberry initially. And it was odd because I saw him walk into the locker room after practice just Monday, and he looked fine. So we weren't really sure what was happening. We didn't get much of an update, but he did walk in shortly after practice began, not dressed, walked over and observed all the team drills and position drills. But he was wearing a compression sleeve on his right leg. So we're not quite sure at this point in time what type of injury he's dealing with. We imagine it has something to do with his leg. It could be quad, it could be knee, it could be ankle, it could be something. It could even be a foot. But at this point, we have no idea what it is. And that was also a big blow because the backup center, Luke Wattenberg, one of their rookie draft picks, he wasn't at practice either. He was hurt as he's dealing with an ankle injury suffered against the Dallas Cowboys in their 17-7 victory. So you know what that meant? That meant that Graham Glasgow got to get reps at the center position today. And I thought Graham had a really good game against the Dallas Cowboys playing the guard position.
I thought you were going to say, you know what that meant? Kendall Hinton to the rescue at the center position. No,
Could you imagine? Oh my goodness.
That would be hilarious if they did it just as like a joke or something like that. Just send him out there and be like, all right, well, our top two centers are out. I guess we got to call on Kendall Hinton. No, I mean, definitely it feels like the injuries on the interior offensive line and just the offensive line in general are kind of piling up. Thank goodness Billy Turner was back out off the pup. And really, I think, Cody, for me, I mean, you just look at this. We talked about this before training camp began, how maybe the Broncos don't have a solidified starting five on the offensive line, or didn't at that time. But I think what they did have was like 10 or 11 guys that could be on an NFL roster. And now what we're looking at is Netane Muti. He had the arthroscopic surgery on his knee, right? So we don't know exactly how long he's going to be out. And I think that's definitely a slight concern. Tom Compton, never good to have a back injury for any player, but really offensive lineman. That's a tough deal. So the fact that he's dealing with a back injury is concerning. Then obviously you've got Billy Turner coming back from, his own injury, and all of these different little things, just kind of these dings and bruises. Now Cushenberry and Luke Wattenberg, and I mean, my goodness, it's like Graham Glasgow is also coming off injury, so it's not like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's tough. So to me, I'm kind of in the same boat now as I was about the receiver position. You kind of just feel like maybe a little knee jerk. Maybe my knee is smacking my chin here, but I feel like maybe you go out and maybe you consider bringing somebody in, because you really can't afford to lose another guy out there. So obviously, with Graham Glasgow being I don't know if you want to call him the third center. Sure, that's great. I think there was rumors that he might be even the number one going into training camp. We haven't really seen him competing there very much, but I don't know. Do you feel good about Graham Glasgow there? Do you feel like it's kind of an emergency deal? I mean, you just wonder about Lloyd Cushenberry not even coming out and doing warmups or working on the side field or anything like that. That's a little concerning.
For me, based on what Nathaniel Hackett was saying, I feel like it's a day-to-day thing, right? I don't think there's any concern. Like, I probably would have been more concerned if Cushenberry wasn't at practice at all. Like, we didn't see him and he wasn't out there. But he literally walked from the locker room all the way up through the rain, up the hill to the Pat Bowlen Field house right behind us, walked in. So a part of me is just imagining it's just like a little thing. And one thing we've seen with this coaching staff, specifically with Nathaniel Hackett, is going through and making sure that guys who are injured or guys who are banged up, they're not just throwing them right back out there, right? Because once you're injured in a sense, or you have a ding and you go back out there, your chance at making it worse goes up a little bit, or maybe overcompensating and getting injured in another way, it goes up a little bit. So I imagine it's going to be day to day. Luke Wattenberg, I think it's just the ankle. They're going to see what they're going to do with him at this point. But I thought that Graham Glasgow did a pretty good job getting the reps at center. I thought he got the ball to the quarterback. He didn't see really any mishaps. I think earlier on in a team period, I think he had to take reps at center for everybody, a first team, second team, and third team. So he got actually a ton of reps in Tuesday's practice for the Broncos. So that might be a little bit of an emergency go-to for this Broncos team if, in fact, Lloyd Cushenberry were to miss any time. But we'll find out a little bit more this week from Nathaniel Hackett and the Broncos medical staff as that comes out. But I do think it's very interesting, right? We've been talking about Lloyd Cushenberry this offseason. We talked about the expectations that he has and how important it is that he gets chemistry with Russell Wilson. DJ Jones met with the media after Tuesday's practice, and he was asked a question, and he was asked, who's an offensive lineman that has stood out to you so far through training camp? And without hesitation, DJ Jones mentioned Lloyd Cushenberry and said that he's improved a lot. He's physical. And I can tell you this, just watching Cushenberry, he looks more comfortable this year than he has in his first 2 years. So I think he'll be a very intricate part of how things are. But I am eager and I am curious to see maybe how long he may or may not practice.
Yeah, and you certainly hope it's not an extended absence, because at this point, really, those practices, I think, is what we're going to get for the starting offense, right? I don't think we're going to see a ton of them out there in the preseason, if at all. And I know that the Packers really didn't send their starting unit out there much last year. I don't know if Nathaniel Hackett's going to employ that. He hasn't definitively said, we're not going to play the starters at all, but you kind of get that vibe based on the way that he talks. He talks about how valuable the practice reps are for those guys, and how, they get basically what they need to get out of their practice reps. So you just wonder, but you certainly want to be able to make contingency plans now. You don't want to be worrying about this the week of, the first game or anything like that.
Yeah.
So it's good that they're getting the opportunity to do this now. Graham Glasgow, I felt like he should have probably got some snaps initially anyway, but just to have that rapport a little bit with Russell Wilson, I think will be important. And I think it's good too. Maybe Russell will go snap with him after practice or before practice or something like that. Or maybe Dalton Reisner get involved there as well if Graham's best position is left guard, or just guard in general. So I feel like there's options there for the Broncos. We know that versatility is absolutely huge for Nathaniel Hackett. I was even looking up because I thought Billy Turner had mentioned during his introductory press conference, like, I'll even play center if they ask me to do that. I know he's never played it, but he kind of spoke to the, with
He said it
Nathaniel
the other
Hackett, you
day.
really never know. Yeah, did he? Okay, so I knew I wasn't just making it up in my head.
Well, one of the things he said too is he was asked a question by a reporter about whether or not, he's open to playing any other position. He's like, anytime I say something like that, it always happens. So he's like, I'm not putting anything out there just yet. So he's trying to work his way back. And I know we'll talk about Billy Turner a little bit more in depth on tomorrow's episode of the show, especially as it pertains to right tackle. But we will continue to follow the Lloyd Cushenberry saga and see if he returns to practice on Wednesday at the UC Health Training Center. But Broncos country coming up here in just a moment. We're going to talk about the Broncos' newest addition at the linebacker spot, and Joe Schobert coming over after playing with the Pittsburgh Steelers last season. Some surprise early on from him. What does that entail? You get that coming up here in just a moment. But before we dive deeper to that, let me tell you about BetOnline.net, the sponsor of today's episode, Locked On Broncos. BetOnline.net is the fastest and the easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. You can find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. You can find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information. From live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts, they have you covered all in one place. So head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. After Jonas Griffith's injury against the Dallas Cowboys, the Broncos made a move early on in the week to bring in Joe Schobert, a veteran linebacker who played with the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2021, but his utilization so far early on in Broncos country could be very interesting. Thank you so much, Broncos country, for tuning in, making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. When you need objective Denver Broncos news, content, and coverage without hot takes, without any of the other stuff, this is your go-to, and you should make us your #1 listen every single day. We appreciate you so much, everybody. Make sure you hit the subscribe or that follow button. Make sure you comment down below on YouTube so you never miss out on a day's worth of Denver Broncos news, content, coverage, and more here, Locked On Broncos. All right, Sayre, obviously Joe Schobert coming in. We knew just a few weeks ago he came in for a visit initially. The story is, though, recently he moved to the area, not football related. His wife is starting up a dance academy, so he moved here with her. And it just so happened to be that the Broncos play football about 20 minutes down the road from him. So when they needed some help at linebacker, they called him again after Jonas Griffith's injury. It was a quick sign, and he came in yesterday. But what's even more surprising, they kind of thrust him into that defense right away. They kind of threw him into the fire, which makes sense because he played in 16 games for the Steelers last year. He started 15. He's a veteran guy. He's a former Pro Bowl guy. They want him to pick up the defense quickly if they really do need him down the road.
And I think that's a smart play for the Broncos and for Joe Schobert as well. I mean, just when he came in for a visit, you kind of wondered, like, when he didn't sign right away, because anytime a big name player like that comes in for a visit, you kind of assume that it's a kind of just a formality to say, all right, we're here to get this deal done. Let's do the visit. Let's do the contract, et cetera, et cetera. But when he didn't sign, I couldn't help but wonder to myself, like, were the Broncos not able to kind of promise him the type of role that he was wanting or looking for this season, which obviously, I mean, as his pedigree averaging 120 some tackles a year over the last 5 years, certainly you would think the guy wants to play. And so, and I get that. I understand that. I resonate with that. You want to participate. So I think definitely getting him involved right away, a little surprising just because of kind of the process behind everything. It's not like they threw him out there with the third defense. He's already working with Josey Jewell and those type of things. And I think that's good. I think it's good for the Broncos to say, you know what, we're going to kind of attack this position. We want the experience out there. We're going to put the best team out there that we possibly can. And I think Joe Schobert is an upgrade over, and I think Alex Singleton was what everybody thought would be the next man up. I would say I would take Joe Schobert in this situation, just based on his pedigree, based on the longevity of how well he's played in the NFL, and the fact that the guy's only 28 years old. I mean, it's not like the Broncos signed this 37-year-old veteran linebacker and are asking him to go start 17 games this year. No, Joe Schobert is a 28-year-old guy who's averaged over 120 tackles the last 5 years. I think it's smart to get him involved and get him up to speed, give him that crash course right away.
And that's not a bad thing, too. But I also believe that with what they were doing with mixing Schobert, kind of getting him involved in the defense right away to pick up the terminology, kind of having his feet to the fire, is the fact that they believe Josey Jewell can play the other linebacker position. Like, they believe he can play either the Mike or the Will. So it kind of gives him flexibility. If Schobert's more of a Mike guy, you can put Josey at Will. You can do certain things there. But also, I will say, too, they've also been rotating guys like Alex Singleton, Justin Sternad, getting some reps as well with the defense. So I think that they're really trying to just figure out what the right move is for them. But, as you mentioned, his experience speaks for itself, his ability to impact the defense. I think the only questions that Broncos country has is, can he pick up the defense, as complex as it may be, and with all the rules that it has to it, even though that Ejiro Evero has simplified it. The guys who played on this defense last year, they know it's defense. Guys who have not played this defense, though, it is a process coming in and having to learn it. So will that be something that hurts the Broncos or helps them if he's on the roster for week 1 against the Seattle Seahawks? That is something I think we need to keep an eye on. But also, there is a possibility Jonas Griffith could be back by the season opener. That has not yet been ruled out. The timeline was 4 to 6 weeks. It's possible he comes back in week 4 with a big old elbow brace. But then granted, this is not the deer antler spray that Ray Lewis used to play against the Denver Broncos inside the playoffs. So, like I said, Jonas Griffith, once he comes back, he will be the starter. He will be the guy getting the reps alongside Josey Jewell. So for the meantime, I mean, it doesn't hurt to have a backup guy. I mean, it's not going to cost you a lot to have Joe Schobert on your roster. I think it's a good thing for this Denver Broncos team to have the depth that they do right now with these guys. And like I said, I think Singleton and Sternad behind him, I think that's also a great security blanket for them to have too.
Yeah, it is. And you've got plenty of guys out there now that you can have certain guys focus on special teams. Like you said, you can have this kind of rotation if you want. And I think you made a great point about Josey Jewell playing both positions. I think one of the skills that he developed back in 2020, the last time we really saw him play full time, and even kind of leaking over into 2021, is his ability to blitz, his ability to attack the line of scrimmage. You know, he's really effective in that way. He was a really good pass rusher back in 2020 when he was given the opportunity to do so. So I would be excited to see him be able to do some more of those types of things. And I think definitely having that experience out there, it just helps you sleep a little bit at night. You know, you're not one injury away. And I think what can give other fans and people that are listening a little bit more peace, even still, the fact that the Broncos traded for Jonas Griffith last year and he ended up kind of breaking out over those last 4 games. You trade for Kenny Young and he was able to come in and kind of look good right away. So it's not the exact same defense. You know, it's not that it's similar, right? It's not the exact same terminology and those type of things, but I think there's some value to knowing that those two guys kind of came in and were able to get up to speed and make an impact early on in their time with the team. And I think playing next to Josey Jewell is going to help. And Justin Simmons, obviously, on the back end. Those guys are going to help a lot with communication and being able to put these players in the right place no matter who's out there on the field.
I think that's a great point too. And you have a hands-on coaching staff that is willing to walk you through it. Like they spend a lot of time in meetings because contrary to what most people believe the NFL players do, they just believe they go to practice for a couple hours, go home, and then show up for the games. That's not the case. These players are at the practice facility for sometimes 10 to 11 hours a day, whether it's practice, meetings, recovery, 10 plus hours a day, every single day, all throughout the entire year. These players are working their tail off. And, you know, it's not just like, hey, I'm going to go practice. I'm going to go home after this. And I'll see you guys on Sunday. It's not like that one bit. I know a lot of people think that's how it works. That's not how it works. So Joe Schobert, I think, will be brought up to speed pretty quickly. We'll continue to see what goes on with the Broncos this week as they prepare for their second preseason game against the Buffalo Bills. Will the starters play? Nathaniel Hackett said in his post-practice presser on Tuesday, he doesn't like the preseason, which, you know what? I'm with him. You do not have to play your starters in the preseason. I don't think that Denver should, especially with some of the injuries that they've had. And Tuesday, Marquise Spencer went down with a knee injury, but initial test came back, and it is not a severe injury. No ligament damage, no ACL tear. It was feared initially, but luckily he dodged a bullet because he's been having a good camp. So we'll see if the Broncos can get back healthy here in the next couple of days at the UCL Training Center. You know that myself and Sayre Bedinger will have you covered every single day. One of the topics on tomorrow's episode of the show, right tackle competition. Calvin Anderson, Billy Turner, now that he's off the PUP list, and Cam Fleming maybe being thrown into the mix. We talk about that in a little bit more on tomorrow's episode, Locked On Broncos, plus all the recap that you need from Wednesday's practice. We have you covered here, Locked On Broncos.